Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Maxfield with Purpose First Advisors, and I am joined by.
Dr. Donna Marino. I'm a psychologist and family business consultant.
And we're so glad you're joining us today. If you've been following our posts on LinkedIn, you know that we have decided to dive into some topics that people don't often talk about. Starting with what we think is going to be the first in a four-part series of talking about grief in the workplace, particularly from the viewpoint of family and small business owners, and the different ways that loss, grief, death, disability, all the kinds of things we like to pretend won't impact us and hope won't impact us, often do. And what does that mean for us? So, Donna, we talked about starting just to frame the conversation. And the reason why we thought this was going to be a multi part series is because it shows up in so many different ways. Um, just last night, you said to me, uh, the small towns in which these businesses run are often impacted by a sudden change in somebody's health status, a death, a passing, a divorce, and other tragedies that might hit. So, what have you seen in your experience with regard to what happens um, when loss hits a business?
Yeah. I think it's a big challenge, and as we talked about reframing grief and loss into more than death and all those other things in small communities where they may even be the largest employer in the community. When there's a loss in that business, there's a loss in the community, and so many different people are affected. With the businesses I work with, sometimes there's 2 and 3 generations of a family working in the business, non-family members, who have lived in that community for a long time. And I know that we're gonna talk about this more later, but, I'm seeing, you know, employees and suicide, and how does that impact the community and the workplace and the owners and all of those people. So when you're leading a business through grief, a parent passes, or another family member who's a leader, and now you have to step up. You're dealing with so much newness of both living a life without that person, as well as trying to step into their shoes, trying to navigate the company, navigate the loss the employees feel in this transition and change and their relationship with the leader. It's a lot to manage all at once.
It is, and I think that what I even struggled with putting this together, and I'm just going to take a moment and make sure that one of our guests who wants to join us, since we had some technical difficulties, I can't even say the word we had. Um,
Mm.
then I'm just going to send Scott that information so that he can join us in this discussion. Um,
Yeah.
what I had trouble with was just even teasing out, um, which part of the loss was going to be the topic of discussion. Like, I'm an
Right.
owner and I pass away, and how does that impact my family who may or may not be running the business? I'm having challenges. Uh, there we go. I'm an employee in the business, but I'm in leadership. I am, like you said, a family in a small town where most of my family is employed by it, and I've known the people who own and operate the business forever and ever. Like, there's just so many ways that this shows up, and like for me personally, the way it showed up was my dad passed away. He ran our family business. None of us four kids were in there in the business operating it, but my uncle was. And
Hmm.
um, and so that becomes a whole different conversation. Um, and I was also running my own business. So there was the grief of my father passing away, the family needing to deal with the consequences that created for his business, and then my need to go and uh, function in my own business where the loss hadn't actually occurred, but where I was very much
Right.
experiencing it. So that's really the challenge I think
Yeah.
exists. Is it's we're going to talk about these things and try to do it in a way that looks at them as distinct pieces, but in fact they're all very much intertwined, and it might not be that the loss happened at your business, but you're the leader of your business and you're experiencing a loss, and your team is still expecting you to show up and lead while you're grieving and managing through both the practical, emotional, spiritual things that are there. So that's our way of saying this is
Hmm.
complicated. This is
Right.
complicated.
Right. There's so many different factors, and like you dealing with my own losses while working, while running a business, while having a very service-based, people-focused business, for their healing and help, having to recognize my limitations during that time. What kind of work I could focus on, what kind of work I couldn't, what could I potentially delegate, how could I step away from certain things to manage this in a healthy way. And oftentimes, I have to explain to people grief comes in waves,
Oh gosh.
and grief lasts so much longer than we think it does, that we want it to, that other people want it to. And it's something in our society we don't even talk about, which
No.
makes it even harder.
And it shows up in so many unexpected ways. So not only is it waves, but you can really be in a place where you think you've processed it and something happens and the memory triggers a memory, or it um, forces you to face something that you've decided you're not ready to process. So that I think your point about we often want someone to get over it, whether that's
Yeah,
ourselves as the leader or the other people on our team. And getting over it is um, an unrealistic expectation.
right, right. I think for those of us that have experienced grief and loss, um, there are many things you don't get over, and that's, when you lose someone that you have deeply loved, you don't get over with that. You adapt over time in different ways, and the severity of those feelings change. But that expression even is so indicative of our culture around it. And it can be challenging that it's something that we don't talk about. If we think about workplace policies, right, we give 1 or 2 days for bereavement, and often only for those immediate family members, which is not the reality of how emotions work and how we work as people. I think that it's extremely hard to navigate, especially as the leader, when so many people are depending on you and are depending on you to steer the ship. It's another reason why you want to surround yourself with other executives in the business who you trust, who you can pass the ball to. It's another reason for cross training and things like that that are hard for family business owners because they want to be in everything. Um,
Yes.
and the reality is you can't always. And as high performing people, it is so hard to accept anything less than perfection, from ourselves. And the reality is you just don't function at 100% when you're in the middle of grief.
No, you don't. So you don't, your team doesn't. And I think having the conversation about it, that we also think if we don't talk about it, it won't be there and it will go away. And instead, not just training up and cross training our teams so that if we have to hand the ball off to someone else, we can. But I think asking for help is oftentimes we're not
Mm.
willing to say, I really can't be in this meeting. I need you to represent me. I need you to represent the company. I need you to take the lead on this. I need you to help me carry some water. If we're not practicing our ability to ask for help before tragedy strikes, it's very hard to do it in the midst of all of the other things you're feeling, because now you may, have all sorts of feelings around asking for help and needing help and not wanting help and all those things.
Yes, yes. I just had that conversation this morning with a client about making making big decisions before they become emotional, making those decisions when you can do it from a rational and logical place. So, as you're saying, practicing help before the crisis comes. And I find that that is such a common struggle with leaders is being the one to ask for help and delegating to other people. I Again, high performing people tend to like, I can do it all, I can carry it all.
I
And
should do
they're
it all. I
right.
should carry it all.
It's all my responsibility, all on my shoulders. And um maybe some days you can handle that and function like that. But when the time comes that you can't, if you haven't practiced those skill sets
Yeah.
of, you know, asking for help, saying no, setting boundaries, delegating, you're just going to feel underwater when it happens.
Yeah, you really are. And I even think about my own dad. So my dad, my grandfather started the business when my dad was like middle school, high school. By the time my father
Mm.
graduated at 17, he pretty much took over the business from my grandfather. And Pop would come in and wave. It was an all cash business at the time. He'd probably take a few dollars out of the till and, he'd go on his day. Um, and so for a long time before he passed away, he wasn't in the day to day operations of the business. That doesn't mean he wasn't involved, but he wasn't physically present on the day to day. And so then I think of my dad losing his dad when I was a young person. Like
Mhm.
I was under the age of 12, I think. Um, and then hearing from my mom about how he grieved the loss of his father. He needed to continue to show up every day in the business that was located next to the house he grew up in. So
Mm.
literally where he would expect to see his father, because that's where his father had always been, and function.
Mhm.
And as a child, I couldn't appreciate that challenge. I don't know if his employees could appreciate that challenge, but we were also florists, so he did the flowers for his father's funeral. Like there's just,
Oh my
and my
gosh.
uncle's a
Oof.
priest, so my uncle did the service for my grandfather's funeral. Like so, there's like it's sort of the family business showed up even in the rituals of death,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that it wasn't even a question of secession at that point. My father inherited the business. He knew he was going to inherit the business. He had already been running and operating the business, but that didn't mean he wasn't really crushed by losing his dad, um,
Right. Right.
and having to
And
show.
being Yeah, and being a family business, even though your dad was already running it, there was his dad's imprint all over it, right?
Oh,
And all
100%.
these things that were just associated with dad and reminders all of the time of his
All the time.
presence and absence,
All the time.
you know? Yeah,
All the time.
yeah.
Yeah. And then you think about that in terms of also when secession hasn't been discussed and
Mhm.
it's not clear who's taking over, or it's all been very verbal, like you're going to be you're going to take this seat.
Yeah.
I'm never leaving this seat, but if I ever leave this seat, you'll take it one day. um and then to suddenly have to take on that seat often
Mhm.
because family members don't necessarily, and other leaders, but I would say, especially when the successor is assumed to be the family member, they haven't actually given that person the opportunity to do the role while they're still there.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
to be the face of the business, to make mission critical decisions, to commit them to high value contracts or whatever the case may be. And so now a lot of talk about that's what you'll get to do when the time comes. And now the time comes.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you're learning on the job in some cases while also dealing with the absence and loss.
Right, right. And the reality is, from my psychology and neuropsychology experience, your brain is not functioning in top capacity. The emotional parts of your brain and the amygdala are all really firing at that time. And your frontal lobe, where we have executive functioning and planning and organization, and the parts of your brain in there that have learning and memory, they're not at their top capacity. So you're trying to do that at diminished capacity while your emotions are running, and you're really in a chronic stress response at that time. So you're at such a disadvantage for learning it and just being dumped into it, and that lack of preparation, and then this feeling of huge responsibility of not just to the employees that you want to take care of, but also now legacy of that person who's not there, and how do you fill their shoes. And I mean, as we said in the beginning, it becomes so complex.
Yes.
And when it's a family business and you have other family members working in the business, you know, judgment, thoughts about how it should be done, thoughts about maybe they think they should be sitting in that chair. I mean, you have all the usual kind of complicated family dynamics on layer upon layer upon layer.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And because people don't like to think about their mortality, they may actually not have done any of the legal work needed to make
Yeah.
sure that their assumed successor has the capability of executing on what they
Mhm.
have to do at that moment in time. So there
Yeah. And I'm sure as an exit planner, you see that.
yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, folks will tell me whether they have a family member or not in their business who they assume will take the lead in the event of an emergency.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's a lot easier for owners to think about that in the context of if it ever happens rather than you will die. It's more like if we ever happen to hit by the proverbial bus or get to go to Tahiti indefinitely for the rest of my life, or frankly, if there was a disability that meant I couldn't come in and function at the way that I had previously functioned, they're okay thinking about that short term, but it's a lot more daunting to think about what happens when you can't step back in. You're not necessarily deceased, but you cannot step back in, and someone does have to take
Mhm.
over. And
Mhm.
um, have you done the not only the necessary training for that person and help them grow and develop as the leader you need them to be when the time comes, but have you done the legal preparation? Can they access the bank account? Can they process payroll? Can they sign contracts? Um, they're functionally things that an owner can do because they are the owner that other people may not have the legal permission to do. I've also seen where the will it says what it needs to say, a trust says what it needs to say, and there is a fiduciary representative named, but there's no distinction between a personal fiduciary responsibility and a business fiduciary responsibility, and so that
Mm.
just becomes the default fiduciary responsibility. And the more you talk with owners, they're like, there are people I trust to take care of my personal finances and to execute on the trust the way I want them to do. But they have no interest in or knowledge of my business. and they would not
Yeah.
be, it would be a burden to them and they would not be well suited towards it. So you actually need a separate legal instrument to make sure that they can make those, whomever you want to be making those financial decisions for the business can.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah,
also
and
in,
I've
in partnerships too, partners don't necessarily want to be in business with the remaining spouse either. Like
right.
there's,
Oh, I've definitely seen that. Or the remaining spouse really doesn't wanna be in it, but who's gonna take it and the responsibility they feel to the spouse they just lost? There's so many different scenarios that can happen, that both preparing as best you can and also knowing no matter how much preparation there is, I
it's going to be hard.
that power of the grief is really hard, and it's not like you can avoid that part. I had a situation where I was brought into a family where there was a sudden medical emergency with that owner, that he, he could not return back to work. And the children take the business, but one is new to the business, one is been there a while. Nothing is like, their understanding is 50-50 ownership, but that's not written down anywhere.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And right, their parent is still alive, but the loss is so heavy, and the lack of direction, and my parent is not able to function in the same way, and they're still like, hey, I was just sitting at their hospital bedside for maybe even weeks, and now I'm running into the office, I'm going to the hospital, we didn't know what was going to happen. And there can be trauma there, and then
Oh,
functioning
yeah.
under the trauma and the loss and the all those pieces. And I think that it's again, the same types of people that are driven and get into these roles are also the same types of people that have a hard time um feeding their emotional self, right? Often, that neglect their own self-care, that have a hard time giving themselves grace and acceptance and compassion, and they may have that in spades for other people, but when it comes to themselves, they don't always have that. And to your point earlier, it's kind of important to learn how to start practicing that well in advance of a crisis. But having a strong support system, not just in the office, but at home, friends, family, other people who can even tell you to slow down, who can prepare you a meal, who can help support you through this, is really important. And we can have these really unrealistic expectations of ourselves.
Yes.
I wasn't in a family business when I lost my father in 9/11, and I was still actually in graduate school, but the demands of that, and right, how high performing and driven do you need to be to go for your doctorate,
Uh-huh.
and be in the middle of all that and be like, I can't function, like, and I'm seeing clients. I'm trying to serve other people, and I'm responsible for them, and having to say, you know what, I don't have it to give right now,
Mhm.
and I need to step away right now because
Yeah.
I can't do that, and it's not fair to either one of us.
Yes.
And to admit those limitations, and then even with school, to recognize, this is what I can do. I can show up for class, I can sit there, I can write notes, but my brain could not function to read a textbook to save my life,
Yeah.
right? And it
You
was
couldn't
like,
concentrate.
yeah. And I had a great support system, both at the school, from the professors, from my colleagues, and supervisors, as well as friends and family. And that's those are the things that got me back and up and functioning again. But it's a different situation, but it's still that you have this strong drive, you have lots of commitments to other people, and the disruption in your life, and trying to put those pieces back together when people are counting on you.
Absolutely. So along those lines, talking about how do you prepare for being able you're not going to stop being a leader and you're not going to stop being in grief, right? And those
Mhm.
two things will be happening simultaneously. I'm taking notes as we're talking and thinking, so there's that strong personal network of
Mhm.
how can people pitch in, because if you do need to leave the hospital bedside, um, or to attend to things at the office while people also need you at home, that personal network can help you personally, but it can also take some of the burdens off of making the meal, doing the laundry, getting the kids to where they need to be, whatever functionally has to keep happening, because life didn't actually stop, even though that's what
Right.
it feels like,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So you've got your
Yeah.
personal team that you feel confident that you can tap in. And again, should be tapping in early and often now, because that overwhelming plate of things you're dealing with as an owner are and are there regardless of whether or not you have a tragedy that's occurred or experiencing a loss. And so how do you get better at tapping in that team on a regular basis and saying, I don't have to do I can pay somebody to clean the
Mhm.
house, and I can pay somebody to pick up the kids, or whatever the case may be, that it doesn't always have to be the business that gets a delegation. There can be delegation
Right.
in your personal
Right.
life. And then on your work
Yes.
side, we know that what makes your business more valuable is the less it depends on you, right? Your business becomes more valuable the less it requires you to be there all day, every day to make it run. So even if we weren't thinking about death and disability, even if we were all going to live
Right.
forever, but we wanted to position our business for success, to be most successful for our clients and our employees, and most successful in terms of valuation, we would already be putting some time and energy into making ourselves redundant as the owner. We'd be hiring those skilled staff people, we'd be cross training, we'd be delegating, we'd be documenting processes and procedures. And by default, that would A, create more value and wealth for us. B, create more personal freedom, which is probably why you got into business in the first place.
Right.
And then create business continuity for when something happens and you need to step away
Mhm.
from the business.
Mhm.
So there's this putting your personal team together, putting your business team together, and then practicing the self care of, I don't have to work 12-hour days or 14-hour days or 18, whatever the case may be.
Right,
I,
right. And
I,
if you free up your time, right? You have the time. I'm gonna exercise. I'm gonna go to therapy. I'm gonna spend more time with my partner, my support group. And then it's there too when you need it. But also what we often forget about is building the actively and consciously building the muscle of resilience, and self-care builds resilience.
how does
If you're
can you connect that dot more clearly for us? Because I
Yeah,
think we
yeah,
hear that and intellectually say, yeah, that makes sense. But how does
right.
it make it easier for me to bounce back, which is how I think most people define
Mhm.
resilience.
Right, right. Well, I mean, if you think about it and you're not tending to your basic, you know, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional needs, you're not functioning at your best. And if you think about it like as functioning kind of down here, even though you think you're doing great and you're close to burnout, perhaps, right? Something happens and you're sunk, right? If you're functioning more up here because you get enough sleep, you have good nutrition, you exercise, you're tending to your emotional, spiritual, physical, social self, if you drop, you're not going to be in the basement. You're going to have more. You're also going to have more support systems and resources to pull from, to bounce back to, and to pull yourself up. And resilience really is a skill. Resilience, adaptability, they both benefit your business and benefit you in good times and in bad times. And that's, again, what I hear you saying, is like all this preparation, and it's not just preparation for the grief, for the loss, the bad stuff, the hard stuff. It's things that position yourself better uh, for life, for a higher quality of life and well-being, for the health of you, your family, and your business.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
all of those things are always intertwined. It's a whole, it's not parts.
Yes. And the visual that comes for me is we know that the more space we can put between us and the car ahead of us, we increase our likelihood of having enough time to react and respond without slamming right into the rear end of somebody else, right? So
Right.
time gives us the ability to react thoughtfully and with intention, and to plan and to be prepared, right? Um, and then I also was just thinking about how um, practicing that and coming to the idea that bouncing back doesn't necessarily mean bouncing back to the exact same place you were before the bad thing happened or the
Yeah.
challenging thing happened. That I think if a rubber band gets stretched to its limit all the time, it bounces back, but it doesn't bounce back to the form it was when you took it out of the package originally. And
Mhm.
if our expectation is we will always go back to our perceived level of excellence, performance, tolerance, like I can muscle my way through it. I'll bounce back and I'll be able to then put my head down and torture my body, soul, and mind a little bit longer, right? But that we want you to be able to bounce back and adapt, but that's you may not look like the same leader you did prior to needing to bounce,
Mhm.
right? Because the alternative is you shut down and you can't function at all. You're unable to adapt and respond. And we want you to be able to prepare yourself to bounce back and give yourself the grace of, I might actually need to operate in a fundamentally different way moving forward. Because a lot
Which
of
is
the
not
things,
a bad
which is
thing,
not a bad thing,
right? It's
because I've
like
learned
I
through this experience as well, right? Like
yes. Yes.
stuffing my
Right?
feelings and
Like
covering them with chocolate probably isn't the best coping strategy.
what I could bounce back from quickly in my 20s is not I don't bounce back from quickly.
Right.
Now I'm
So
not giving my age, but
right. No, 100% here,
yeah,
100%.
right?
But then
And
looking
it's
at
not
that in our
bad.
business.
It's wisdom and guidance and knowledge and learning how to listen more, respect for yourself and others. It's also what you model for your team,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I think about that all the time, that as leaders, will say, like, oh, well, I don't expect them to work 14-hour days. This is my company. And again, I was just talking about this with a client, right? But when I send an email at 2:30 in the morning, my employees, whether you intended or not, get the impression, oh, I need to be responding now, or I need to be, and I know that's an extreme example,
But it's
but
not, it happens all the time. I mean,
yeah.
the email example in particular of I didn't they'll say, "I don't expect you to respond," but, right? Um, you've you've
Hmm.
you've interrupted the time that you've asked them and they have need to have separate and apart from that role.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter what you intended. The impact is that
Right.
you've set unintentional expectations, and they're going to follow what you do and not what you say.
Yeah. Yeah, even if it's on a subconscious level for
100%.
the employee, right? Oh, I know. And it comes back to the old expression, right? Do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
actions speak louder than words. We have all these expressions for a reason. And so if you want your employees to also model self-care and wellness, if you have compassion for them during grief but not for yourself, all those messages go out one way or another.
Yeah. And I don't think what I think some people might think is, well, when we create that space and that openness, we absolve people of accountability. We don't absolve people, even ourselves, of accountability. What we do is we open up the window for accountability to look different. That calling in that help, delegating things, making sure that your own workload or somebody else's workload is less demanding for a period of time, putting off a decision. If everything is urgent and everything is important, nothing is urgent, nothing is important. So can you, in the times before there is a crisis, practice slower decision making, not because you're dragging your heels, but because you want to be more intentional and you don't want your team to assume that every time something needs to be done, it has to be done at double speed. And, the faster, the
Mhm,
better. So I think
mhm.
this is really helpful for me as I go and work with my clients too, about you're setting the tone for your employees, but you're also, this is helping your it's a seatbelt for your business, right?
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
when impacts occur, they're less damaging, less volatile. And then I think that other
Mhm.
piece we touched on was there's a structural way that you need to design your business so that it can withstand trauma and loss, meaning you have documented policies and procedures, you've cross-trained your team, you've put in the necessary insurance that's required, and you've made sure that there is legal authority for people to make decisions in the absence of current decision makers. And I think that's a piece that, especially as owners, we tend to not necessarily think all the way through. Like if we have an operating agreement, if we have a partner, we have an operating agreement, we hopefully have a buy sell agreement, we hopefully have insurance that's funding that. But I also know my body bounces back differently than at 51 than at 21. But my financial needs are different, and the things I need to protect
Mhm.
myself, my family, and my business from are different. And so my insurance needs, my banking needs, my wealth management needs, all of those have to evolve with us. And your business isn't separate from that.
Right, right.
So this
Yeah.
was a couple areas in terms of how to prepare, which you might even think too of scenario planning. Let's say you plan to retire in 5 years. What happens if that retirement date gets moved up to 1 year? What does that look like? Let's talk about some of those hypotheticals. And really, especially for the owners who say to me, there's no one who can run this business if I'm not here. What does that mean in terms of how we have to look at your talent development? Or what would a strategy be? Oh, do you have a potential buyer? Do you have a potential person you want to merge with to create more institutional stability and longevity? Um, and who might you bring into the team, and how might you prepare them to be the leader of the future if the current team you have, you feel like the capacity isn't there?
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
it's a lot to think about.
It is. It is, but you wanna think about it now,
um,
because when you're in the thick of it, you can't think. You can't think straight,
yeah,
and you need support, and you need to give yourself grace, and it's like, "So what can I do before? What can I do during? And what do I do after?" Right? And it's like planning for the different pieces as best you can, and then knowing that things are going to happen that you can't plan for.
absolutely.
Right?
But I think
Yeah.
that whole the practice part of planning.
Mhm.
I mean, we also think of
Mhm.
planning results in a plan, and then a plan gets executed. But we're also practicing for plans we're not even sure we need. And
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
now I'm thinking of like professional athletes practice the thing they are going to be called to do every day, but on game day, there could be any number of circumstances that impact their ability to be a peak performer or for the team
Mhm.
or as individual contributors, but that the more they've practiced, the more they can adapt in the moment to
Yep.
what's happening around them, as opposed to if they hadn't practiced 35 plays and watched the other team's
Mhm.
tapes, so to speak, they would be caught flat-footed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I try.
It's one of the things that, I teach clients with anxiety is you don't want to try to learn anxiety strategies while you're anxious, right?
You mean
It's
while I'm
like,
having a panic attack isn't the best time
yeah,
to
right?
learn for
All of a
breathing?
sudden, that's when you're gonna try to practice breathing. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, no, you want to practice it daily when you're not anxious so that you will have that automatic response when you are, and you already know how to do it. It's the same as muscle memory for an athlete. And your brain shuts off when you're in the middle of a panic attack. You're not going to be logical, rational. And frankly, panic attacks happen during grief too. So,
Yes, they do.
practicing these skills is important. And it's not just for crisis, it's for overall when well-being and health. But I think about these things in the same way I think about going to the gym and building muscle,
Mhm.
I it would be wonderful if you just had to go in one time and lift the weights one time and you were good, right? But
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not like that. It's repetition, repetition, consistency, and you're building other muscles. You're building adaptability, resilience, flexibility, emotional intelligence, and these are all the things that in your everyday life make you a better leader, a better person, a better business person, family member. And then they're also your grounding and your foundation and support when things are hard.
Yes. And so as we come into rounding out our time together, that's
Yeah.
where I was sort of the more self-awareness you can have about how you react under stress as well.
Mhm.
Um, I'll say for me, sadness has often manifested as anger in my personal experience because I would say feeling sad makes me feel way more vulnerable than feeling angry does, right? And
Yep.
so if I'm truthful with myself and really aware of what's going on, understanding that that's a way that I've coped before and isn't necessarily a way I want to cope moving forward. But I think understanding how your reactions to stress and tension, uncertainty, volatility, disruption, what is your go-to? Do you shut down? Do you come out swinging? Um, do you look to deflect? Because as my mom said when my dad got sick, he's the same person. He did not fundamentally change who he is. So now that you want him to do all these things because he's sick, she's like, that's not going to happen. Like he's still the same person. So it's like, who are you when you're not in the midst of all of that? And are there things right now you want to manage more effectively and better? Because when the stuff hits the fan, you're certainly, like you said, you're not going to practice your breathing while you're having a panic attack. You're not going to try and show up in a less or more way in the moment when it's happening. So that
Mhm.
self-awareness, and
Mhm.
we've both worked with owners who are recognizing in moments of stress where they're not necessarily death, but divorce and conflict within families and things that they weren't showing up in the way they wanted to show up. And
Mhm.
that not only do they want to show up different in this moment when the stakes are really high, they want to show up differently moving forward because it's what's best
Right.
for their company. So this gives
Yeah.
us a lot to think about.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And life gives us lots of opportunities to learn these skills, to practice these skills, to observe how we react to different levels of stress. Um, and yes, life is unpredictable. I also believe that if you want to change, no matter how old you are, change is possible if you desire it, right? You can't undo what's been done, but you can always learn and grow moving forward. Um, I want to mention before we go, this is a four-part series.
Yes.
So next time we will be addressing grief and loss that comes with succession, which also includes grief and loss of identity. Within that, we're going to be talking about how do you work with your employees during grief and loss. And that comes back to what Christy was saying earlier about, space for grieving versus accountability and balancing that, which is very hard for owners. And then finally, we will be addressing the very tough issue of suicide in the workplace, which sadly I've been seeing a lot more of. And again, it's boy, talk about taboo topics. We don't
Yeah.
talk about that, but um, owners are having more often to deal with that. And how do we talk about these really uncomfortable things?
Yeah.
So
That a handbook isn't going to help us with, right?
no.
And it goes back in those instances also to what culture have you built and
Mm,
what is the culture of the team that is responding to this tragedy and what's happening there. And I also want to just
yeah.
introduce that idea too of um, just like you probably don't want to practice your breathing techniques while you're having a panic attack, you probably don't want to navigate these waters um, by yourself, right? And uh, sometimes you're thinking, well, what would having somebody else in my corner mean for me? How might person be able to help me understand myself better, understand my employees better, understand my family dynamics better? Um, and I know I've tapped Donna in when I thought, wow, the things I'm really good at are getting all up in the operations and talking about employees at more of a systemic level and a leadership and accountability level. But I have clients who really need somebody in their corner to help them understand the psychological and sociological things that are going on in the microcosm that is their business and their family and their business in their family.
Mhm.
And so I just want to nod to the fact that you bringing in a trusted advisor in for their different specialties at different times and having people who can work well together and talk through the issues that nobody wants to talk about and help you and your family strategize that's something we're hoping will come from these conversations as well, that there's real value in working with others to help you um, create these practices, build these muscles, and respond when the time comes.
Yeah.
So
Working with others to deal with the different situations and having your advisors and trusted people work together as well, so everyone's on the same page and rowing the boat in the same direction. And like Christy said, I mean, operations is not my thing, so I can throw it to her. And just knowing that we have the same mindset and perspective on these things, so can guide families as a family and as a business through these situations, as I said, from the whole perspective and not seeing everything as compartmentalized, because it isn't. And even more so in a family business.
yeah. So Donna, where
Yeah.
can folks find you between now and our next conversation?
Oh, drdonnamarino.com, Dr. Donna Marino. LinkedIn, basically my handle everywhere is Dr. Donna Marino, so you can certainly find me.
Wonderful. And you'll find me at Purpose First Advisors as Christy Maxfield on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email at cmaxfield@purposefirstadvisors.com. So we're really thankful that you've joined us. And if you're watching this as a replay, that you carved out the time to explore a topic that most of us don't willingly raise our hand to be a part of. And we hope to continue to provide more resources and perspectives. So please feel free to share with us the things that you might be grappling with or curious about so that we can include
Mhm.
those in our conversations.
Yeah, feel free to send us questions you'd like us to address, especially in these next upcoming episodes.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care.